Hello and welcome back to another episode of In the Crosshairs, where we take an objective look at games both old and new to see how good they really are. For today's review, we're going to be taking a look at one of the strangest anti-heroes I've ever come across, in a game that's equally as strange, featuring, weirdly enough, zombies. But before I forget, I had a suggestion to review another game, and I mentioned this in the last countdown that I did, and if you haven't seen that video, you really should check it out. It's a pretty good watch. But as for the game in question, I'm currently recording it, and let's just say there's going to be a lot to talk about with that one. But we're not going to be talking about that game right now. Instead, we're talking about Prototype, so let's dive right in. Prototype was developed by Radical Entertainment and published by Activision, and it was initially released back in 2009 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. I was a little surprised to learn that at the time of writing that this game is nearly 10 years old. Perhaps I've been staring at too many Nintendo titles, but Prototype feels like a 5-year-old game. But that could be due to the fact that I'm recording this from the PS4's Biohazard bundle, which has Prototype 1 and 2 in it. The game focuses on open-world action surrounding an edgy anti-hero for a protagonist. As a matter of fact, I listed this game as an option for the Edgeathon because of the level of edge to it. Sadly, it did not make the cut because it was beaten out by a Batman game of all things in the straw poll. I guess when Batman gets involved, other games are just flat out beaten. Prototype was quite popular when it was initially released, going as far as becoming a platinum hit game on the Xbox 360. As of 2012, Prototype sold over 2 million copies worldwide. As popular as it is, Prototype also shares a lot of similarities to another open-world action game centered around an edgy anti-hero protagonist. Yeah, you probably should have seen this coming. Prototype bears quite a few general similarities to the game Infamous, and to make things borderline suspicious, Prototype came out 2 weeks after Infamous, so it's kind of hard not to compare the two. Fun fact, Yahtzee from Zero Punctuation did a comparison video between the two games. They were so similar that Yahtzee threw up his hands and said that he would declare a winner to whichever of the two games' developers sent him the best picture of the other game's main character wearing a woman's bra. It was obviously a joke to close out his video, a joke that the developers from both Radical Entertainment and Sucker Punch basically responded with, "Challenge accepted." Needless to say that both teams are horribly brilliant. I guess great minds do think alike. Now excuse me while I go throw up. Our story centers around Alex Mercer, who wakes up in the morgue of the Gentek research building. Having suffered from amnesia, he's forced to flee when private government troops known as Blackwatch come in and start searching for him. Mercer finds out that he has superhuman strength and the ability to assimilate others to gain both their memories and their physical appearance. Mercer uses these skills in an effort to find out both who he is as well as get revenge on both Gentek and Blackwatch. Gentek and Blackwatch have sort of a love-hate relationship throughout the story. Gentek creates biological weapons and Blackwatch tests them on innocent people. The latter doesn't really answer to a higher government, so these guys will kill just about anyone for any reason. Both groups are about as cartoonishly evil as it gets. During his revenge spree, Alex Mercer comes across a Blackwatch project surrounding Hope, Idaho and its sole survivor, Elizabeth Green. Green is held up in the Gentek building, so Mercer goes to bust her out, not thinking what could possibly go wrong. Nice Bubsy moment there, Mercer. Turns out that Green is hosting the mother of all viruses and upon her escape starts infecting the New York population. Basically, we got ourselves a zombie outbreak without it actually being called a zombie outbreak. Either way, New York is fucked. Mercer now needs to also find and kill Elizabeth Green on top of killing 2 other organizations and regaining his memory. Later on, it turns out that Alex Mercer is not really Alex Mercer at all, but rather an offshoot of the original virus that infected Hope, Idaho. The real Alex Mercer was actually a researcher for Gentek, but when Blackwatch started killing the other researchers to cover up leaks, Mercer fled with a sample of the virus. The original Alex Mercer was killed at Penn Station after he was cornered by agents. With his back to the wall, he unleashed the first wave of the virus, and when he was shot down, Mercer fell on the remains of the vial, which caused the virus to infect and reform his body. With the Blacklight virus becoming Alex Mercer, Elizabeth Green sending out another wave of the infection, and Blackwatch killing everything else, New York is now at the center of the most violent gangbang, with Blackwatch's command resorting to nuking the place like they did in Idaho. So Mercer needs to stop them from doing that too. It's like a to-do list of misery with this guy. Gameplay can be broken down into two simple directives: kill anything that moves and quietly kill anything that moves. Prototype would be better named if it was just called Kill Everything in Sight, the video game. There's also side missions you can do, but most of them involve killing copious amounts of living things. Most of them innocent, I might add, but it's not like they're not worth doing. For everything you kill, maim, and destroy, you get evolution points that go towards upgrades. So shut your ass up, steal the nearest tank, and run over groups of terrified people as they run away from you, you monster. You have the option of a number of upgrades to choose from, with some even being required for story progression. Most of the non-story related upgrades aren't really necessary, but some of them do make life a little easier when life is including murderous soldiers that are launching rockets at you. Outside your standard movement and survival upgrades, I found the three most useful upgrades are the blade, whip, and armor upgrades. The blade is great for brawling, the whip is awesome for taking out and stealing helicopters, and the armor upgrade just allows you to take more hits, but it can also be used with the other two upgrades. Now let's get into Mercer's main shape-shifting quality: disguises. If Mercer is spotted, the military will hound him at every turn until he's far away enough to shapeshift into another person so he can re-blend in. Finding a disguise is easy. Look at a crowd of healthy people and pick one. Consuming non-infected people gives you both health and a disguise to sneak around in, but it doesn't work in every case due to the sensors that are made to detect the Blacklight virus. In certain areas you'll need a military disguise, so sneak up against a distracted soldier and eat him up like a Slurpee when no one's looking. If the guy you're currently munching on is important to the story, you'll also be treated to a short cutscene from the person's memory. If the guy you're consuming operates a type of vehicle or a certain weapon, you'll also gain the ability to use said vehicle and handle said weapons better. Speaking of weapons, let's talk about them. No, not the guns you can use, because those are fucking worthless. I'm talking about the other fun stuff you can use as weapons. If you're lacking the whip upgrade, climb to the highest building and rip out the AC unit to hurl at the choppers shooting at you. You can also throw cars, hijack tanks, and take over helicopters with the whip upgrade I mentioned earlier. Man, this thing is handy. Now it's time for the ever so popular bitching and moaning segment of the review. There's a few things holding Prototype back from being an amazing game, starting with the story. The Blacklight virus doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense once you start to think about it. The majority that get infected turn into this game's equivalent of zombies, some even becoming hulking beasts, while Elizabeth Green can consciously control the infection and Alex Mercer can shapeshift himself and parts of himself. All of this screams schizophrenic from the story perspective. Maybe this was explained somewhere in the game, but that would require going out of the way to suck up a lot of people for the web of intrigue. Now we have to look at Alex Mercer as a character. He tends to be just as schizophrenic as a story at times. Sure, he's a pretty badass character, but it's undermined when he's angry about the infection killing the very same people that he's currently running over in a tank. If there's one big thing I have to give the story credit for though, it's how it handles Mercer's amnesia. Most games that have characters with amnesia are so cliche and poorly written nowadays that it's mentally painful. You might think it's the same case here, especially when Mercer can be disabled for a period after having his memory triggered, but it's what you see when you look closer at Mercer's condition that makes his case stand out. When the real Alex Mercer died, his cells started to die as well, including brain cells. After the Blacklight virus reconstructed Mercer's body and became him, the virus also had to try to reconstruct his brain. Because of the dead brain cells, the virus had to reconstruct parts of the brain from scratch, which means fresh new cells would have been made. But since these cells are new, they theoretically would not hold any information for Mercer to draw memories from, hence the gaps in his memory. To put it in a more understandable way, think of a dead pixel on a TV screen. Everything else works fine, but that pixel has missing information that's causing the screen to be incomplete. Think of Mercer's brain as being a big TV screen with a shit ton of dead pixels that need to be replaced, and even then those new pixels need to be programmed for him to get a clear image. It's quite genius really, only it's also undercut by the notion that all of this was very likely a happy accident. Then we have to look at the gameplay and... oh boy. Mercer isn't really good at fighting multiple targets at once without the use of a Devastator. This is mainly how slippery he feels when running around. As a result, there's a targeting feature to help you fight enemies one-on-one, assuming that targeting feature behaves itself. When multiple enemies are on screen, it can be a challenge to go after the enemy you want. Speaking of enemies, let's talk about the bosses and the mini-bosses. I found that the only good boss fight was against Lieutenant Cross. Sure, he hits pretty hard, but nothing about that fight was particularly cheap. All of the other major fights, on the other hand, had enemies that hit like a truck, and with the pack leader, the shockwave of an attack was enough to do a decent chunk of damage. If they're not hitting like a truck, then they will take forever to kill, like the fight against Elizabeth Green. I had to go around consuming until I can activate a few Devastators just so I had the invincibility to avoid damage from her attacks, which can do a shit ton of damage. Then we get to the worst boss fight in the game, the final rematch with the Supreme Hunter. This guy can use Devastators, easily knock you out of critical mass, throw stuff at you, and is also fast enough to keep up with Mercer. This is all within a time limit until a nuke goes off too. If you think it's no big deal and you'll just consume the nearby soldiers, I say good fucking luck, as the Supreme Hunter will very likely hit you with an attack as you're busy with your snack. If you think stealing a helicopter will help in this fight, let me show you why you're wrong. This fight is brutal, cheap, and impossible to stall for time since there's a damn time limit. With that said though, Prototype still has a lot of good things going for it. Yeah, being forced to recover health often can be a pain, but Prototype is a game where health is plentiful. Very rarely will you find yourself in a position with no ability to recover health. It's also kind of funny being in a military base and sneakily consuming everyone inside like Germany in 1939. Most upgrades are really easy to get with the amount of evolution points you receive after a mission. If you'd rather not do a mission, I'd highly recommend destroying either a hive or a military base to help you grind for points. They are numerous, grant decent amounts of points, and nearby tanks will help you make short work of them. If you're the passive-aggressive type that doesn't want to deal with bullets, I also recommend deploying an airstrike on a military base, which will deal 50% damage in one fell swoop. Yeah, you'll definitely get their attention, but that's why you hide until they lose track of you. Then you can do it all over again. With the amount of hives and bases to destroy, you may wonder just how long it would take to get from one place to another. With movement upgrades, you can scale buildings in no time at all, do multiple air dashes, glide in the air, and run along the ground at high speed if you're feeling boring. And though I've mentioned it a few times already, it's still worth noting that the Tentacle Barrage Devastator is the ultimate fuck you to enemies trying to swarm you. It does huge damage, great range, and drops every living thing around Mercer as though it was a hardcore hentai. And as long as you go beyond your normal health range and into critical mass, this move will always be at your disposal. I think the best part is that I always hear Cyborg's voice from Teen Titans whenever I use it. Booyah! My all-time favorite upgrade though has to go to the Patsy upgrade. When disguised, you can accuse an innocent soldier of being you and watch him get mowed down by his own comrades. Completely unhelpful, but fucking funny. So that's Prototype in a nutshell. It has some problems, some of them kinda serious and others that make no sense at all, but the sandbox gameplay, variety of upgrades, and the general mayhem you can cause in this game makes it fun. It's the sort of fun that you shouldn't tell your family or any non-gamers about though, otherwise you're going to get a lot of weird looks. And some may even ask you to seek psychiatric treatment. Thanks for joining me once again for another review. How many of you guys out there have played Prototype before? Did you like it? Did you hate it? I would like to know about your experiences with the game, so leave a comment down below, as well as another game to review if you so happen to have one. As for the suggested game from earlier, I still have a long ways to go before I'm even ready to start writing on the damn thing. But, thankfully, I have a countdown to do next. What's the countdown going to be on? I don't freaking know. But I figure a drunk epiphany will tell me in due time. With that said, this has been Regnilla, and I will see you all again next time. Take care, people.